Okay. Let's just wait for the attendee list to fill in. Hello, everyone. Okay.
A robust and also a punctual attendance today.
Yes. Wonderful.
Good to see some friends in the room.
All right, so I guess I'll get started because we have 35 attendees and it's 12:03. Good, I guess, afternoon as of a couple of minutes ago, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. This is presented by WUMF. At this point, CM credits are pending, so they're still not up. We will endeavor to send an email out when the credits are posted on the APA website. WUMF is a volunteer association of officials in Westchester County Municipal Planning Federation. We host a variety of events like this throughout the year. We're trying to add more CM credits and get more planners to attend and not just planning board members. Although planning board members and zoning board members are welcome, and I think they can get a lot of great information from these sessions. If you're not on our mailing list already, you can sign up on our website at wumf.org. Today, we're joined by Carolyn Grossman Meagher. She's the Director of Economic Development and Regional Planning for the New York City Department of City Planning. Carolyn is a true leader in regional and city planning, and I'm incredibly grateful she's joining us today. She has become a great connector for urban planners throughout the region through the Regional Planning Leadership Network, which I've had a privilege of being a part of. The network meets about quarterly, and it's a fantastic opportunity for communities that have a geographic connection in the region, to share and learn from one another. The meetings typically start off with excellent presentations from Carolyn and her talented staff, and they provide up-to-date analysis on a variety of subjects that are related to planners and policymakers. We thought it would be a great idea, and by we, I really mean Kevin Kane, who put this together, who unfortunately is under the weather today. So I want to thank Kevin for putting this together. We thought it would be great, and Kevin thought it would be great for her to share kind of what she does at these leadership network presentations with a wider audience. So we're really happy to have her here. And again, thank you to Kevin for putting this together. And I'll hand it over to Carolyn.
Thanks, Greg. And let me start with a thanks to you for pinch hitting today with Kevin being under the weather. A thanks to Kevin in absentia for reaching out and for these opportunities to share some of our work. And also a thanks to Sam Nguyen, our third person on the screen here today, who works tirelessly on my team here in the city to make sure that we can be regionally connected, and helped put us today's events together and some of the presentation and materials that you're going to see, but also helps run our regional connections more generally. So let me start where I will end. Oh,
sorry, just one more thing. We're going to reserve questions till the end. However, if you think of a question as the presentation goes on, we do have the Q&A. It should be active, so you can put those questions in the Q&A, and then we'll have the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be answering questions. I hope a lot, because I think this is much more interesting as a conversation than just me giving a presentation deck. But starting where I will end, which is feel free to reach out. I see a lot of people who are in our regional network on the call today, but many whom I have not had the opportunity to meet. Sam's already put our contact information on here. We're always happy to connect with planners around the region, share our resources and our learnings, and learn from you. That's really part of our mission here. So with that, let me make sure I can share a screen. Can folks see slides?
I think we're good.
Yep. Okay, great. Okay, So let me jump in at the most basic. You're all our close neighbors, so hopefully you've been here a few times. You know, I always start with this image to say, you know, people come with a lot of baggage and a lot of like specific ideas, good and bad, about what New York City is. And this is probably the most archetypal, right? Extremely dense, extremely mixed use, congested, complicated, and sometimes blighted or like, you know, or like, but also sometimes extremely vibrant. But you know, like this is the quintessential New York, right? Times Square, like the center of our region. But as planners, we're planning for a ton of different contexts. You know, from high to mid to low densities, commercial, like fully residential, mixed use, but at much different scales than that, industrial mixed use, right? All kinds of different conditions, many of which are, you know, much more comparable and which, you know, touch on the borders with Westchester, right? So, you know, when you usually cross between the Bronx and the Westchester, from a physical built environment perspective, there's not a lot of distinction, you know, there. We're a really big city with a lot of different things going on. We, like Westchester, like many places, have great pride and sort of, you know, a myopic approach to the way we think about the city. You know, we always love this picture, famous cover of the New Yorker magazine of New York and its environs, right? The joke, oh, we don't know what happens across the river or across our borders. You know, and our politics historically reflected that divide. This is another favorite of mine, Ed Koch barricading the Holland Tunnel as part of a press stunt, talking about why would anybody go to New Jersey when they can stay here in New York. This was particularly about redevelopment in Brooklyn at the time in the late 80s, early 90s. But that's not the way we think today. And this really goes back to an effort in the de Blasio administration starting in 2016, where the city wrote into our strategic master plan the importance of the region in meeting New York City's strategic objectives, and really tried to set goalposts and a long-term strategic vision that we rise and fall together, and that the problems that we are experiencing are related to the problems that you're experiencing, interrelated, and often so are the solutions. And out of that work and that sort of change in philosophy, made an extraordinary investment in creating regional planning office at city planning in New York. And over the last decade now, we've really been building regionalism into our practice of city planning. And I say those two words like very distinctly, right? Building regionalism into city planning, right? We're not regional planners. We do have some regional bodies in our region, very different than they exist in other regions. But we're not. We're city planners. We sit in a city planning department, but we try to use what we know about the region to inform our practices and to sort of see that larger strategic interest in regional systems as it pertains to the things we care about. And I'll talk a lot about them, but what are the things we care about? Many of the same things that you all care about. We're thinking about the affordability of our city. We're thinking about the long-term growth of our economy, and the inclusiveness of our economy. We're thinking about stewardship of land, whether that's for creating more economic potential or environmental stewardship. We're thinking about the change, our climate vulnerability. We're thinking about our food systems, right? And all of those things have regionally systemic effects. So, you know, we're building that into our practice, and part of me being here today and us having the resources to put together regional information and bring together regional actors is in response directly to that investment by New York City and that continuing investment. So I think many of you will know this, but perhaps have not seen it recently on a map. There are many of us, right? We are a region that is enormously politically complicated, depending on how you define it. And we have borrowed the definition for a long time of the Regional Plan Association, going back, you know, to the first regional plan of 1929, that looks at this tri-state region, basically defined as a 75-mile circle from Manhattan's Midtown in every direction but the ocean. Some later definitions now would include Pennsylvania, or, you know, different parts of Connecticut in that definition. But, you know, roughly this area, 3 states, 31 counties, although Connecticut doesn't really have counties in the same sense anymore. And, you know, 900 villages, towns, cities. I think I've heard about 780 that have land use authority, which is, you know, enormously important to the work that we all do here. But when you take those borders away, like what do you see, right? We're a region of about 24 million people based on recent census numbers. New York City's 8.5 million. So, you know, we're the 8.5 million pound gorilla at the center here, but we are outnumbered by people who live in other jurisdictions near New York City, but not in New York City. Westchester County, as you all know, is about 1 million of those 24 million residents, but you can get a sense here. And it's mapped at density to the municipality. You can see a lot of those denser municipalities on the Jersey side, in the sort of near in Long Island side, southern Westchester, of course, and then the Connecticut coast, and like a few other cities dotting the Hudson River as you go up into the Hudson Valley in particular. We're a region of about 11 million jobs today. Again, you know, 4.6 million in New York, 42%, enormously powerful center of the economy, but we are outnumbered by economic forces around us. The economy has spread over time. And I love this map again because you look at it, and I'll point the colors out. You've got purple industrial, probably the easiest to see because of the stripe of the Jersey Turnpike kind of going through here. A couple of the airports pop out as well. You can see some of the purple concentrations in Connecticut where they're building ships and helicopters. You can see office sectors pretty well in here, really clustered in both Midtown and Lower Manhattan, sort of at the very center here, but also the office districts. I think that's probably White Plains that's popping up as the blue clusters. So, you know, those are fairly specific. And then local services, education, and healthcare, much more spread evenly all throughout the areas of population centers within the region. But what I love about this, again, is you don't see New York City on the map, right? You see its center of the map, but the economic growth of jobs has accreted over time in a way that's far more related to proximity than it is to political borders. We are the most economically productive region in the nation. We have about a $2 trillion GDP if we calculate that, you know, as a region. You know, about half in city, half out, right? So this is really a measure of both the wages we create and the economic output of our region. You can see on the right here how we relate to all of our sister cities across the US. But what I always love to say is if this was a country, our economy is about the size of Russia or South Korea. So enormously powerful on an international basis. And we're a region of 9.6 million homes now. And this is one where you can really also see the history of our region in the housing maps. We tag this to dark orange is renter occupied housing and light yellow is the owner occupied housing. The map has historically looked very similar if you were doing single family versus multifamily. You can see here again, New York City, about 40% of regional housing. So outnumbered by people who have found housing opportunity near, but not in New York City. But we are still the majority provider of renter occupied housing. And when you look at where the other renter occupied housing has been in the region or multifamily, again, it's really a very similar map. You know, it's the history of rail development in the first part of the 20th century. So, you know, the immediate close-in suburbs directly across the Hudson or in southern Westchester, and then the cities along those rail lines tend to still be those downtowns that are still providing rental housing. Whereas you can see a place like Long Island that never developed downtowns along its rail lines in nearly the same way, much more auto-oriented post-war development pattern. has a lot less of those clusters, and that pattern persists today. So why do I say that these are all connected, right? When we think about really what does it mean that our fates are aligned, we think about affordability, we think about job growth. For us, it's really about this ecosystem of population growth, housing growth, and job growth, and how those are functioning on that regional basis. So, in the most reductive terms, when you look at the exchange between New York City and the areas basically to our north, including Westchester, and mostly focused in Westchester, we are exchanging housing opportunity and economic opportunity on a daily basis. So what that means is that over 200,000 people are commuting to jobs in New York City, maybe not every day now, but still most of the time, which is to say they're finding housing opportunity north of the city, but economic opportunity in the city. And then they're bringing that economic opportunity in the form of nearly $30 billion of wages back to communities in Westchester and beyond. And then in reverse, there's actually a pretty interesting exchange that happens as well. About 60,000 New Yorkers are finding economic opportunity north of the border, and bringing back $5 billion in wages to New York City. And to give you just a little sense of what that looks like, this is the map of in-commuters, and this is the map of out-commuters. And you can see just, spatially how much, when I talk about the Hudson Valley, how dense that pattern is the closer and closer you get to the rail lines and the closer you get to the southern borders of Westchester. That's really where the focus of that exchange and that historic attention has been. So that is powering both of us. It's the reason we need housing. It's the job opportunity, and it's a constantly churning ecosystem of people finding employment and finding a place to live. Right? It's what we all do, and we're all doing it based on proximity, and that's much more powerful than typically the jurisdiction that we live in. So let me talk a little bit about where we are now. Obviously, we're still all living in sort of recovery. At some point, we'll stop saying the word recovery. And I guess I will say today, like, we are recovered, right, in a sense, from a enormous economic shock to the whole region, certainly to New York City, but also a real structural shock to, I think, the way that those ecosystems function. Just to read this chart for a second here, you can see when we all came out of COVID in 2020, New York City, in the darkest color here, was hit the hardest, and it recovered much slower than other parts of the region, and much slower than the United States as a whole, which is shown here in the dashed line. Today, we are all back to each part of the region, New Jersey, Long Island, Hudson Valley, Connecticut. You'll see those abbreviations throughout the presentation. We're all back to over the percentages we were in 2019. That's good. Most of the region, with the exception of Southwest Connecticut, is still a little behind the US in terms of economic growth. And that's a pattern that has some history even in pre-COVID, right? We've been losing economic strength to the South and Southwest, for some time. And there are, these fundamentals of having an affordable region and a place that people can both afford to invest in businesses and afford to invest in talent is part of that picture, right? That we're just a little bit slower. But the good news is that we have made that recovery, and much of the region is sort of on that same footing together. Here's a quick picture. It's sort of where we are on housing production. And this has been fairly static over the years that we've been tracking it using federal data, which there's a few people in the room, I think, who know the real nitty gritty on the many caveats associated with how we're collecting on a federal basis housing production information and its imperfections. But what we know is that the region's been producing a rough 55,000 new housing permits a year. It vacillates a little, but we're kind of in that 50 to 60,000 range, really going back for some time. There's 1 year where New York's production really fell off a cliff, went down to closer to 40,000, but this has been sort of our typical average. You can get a sense here of what those patterns of where the housing permits are. And, not surprising looking at our population patterns. The city has been in that sort of 16 to 20,000 range for some time. Inner New Jersey has really been the surprise over the last few decades of growing enormously. It's now the leader in housing production. The Hudson County and the west side of the Hudson coast. All the way out really to the Pennsylvania border in some cases. There's some really strong transit-oriented development happening on farther afield sections of Jersey transit lines as well. Southwest Connecticut has seen some of its cities, Stamford, Bridgeport, New Haven adding some pretty considerable housing here, as well as some other parts of Fairfield County. Some of the farther afield parts of Hudson Valley, particularly when you're looking at the Hasidic communities of Ramapo, Kiryas Joel, have seen some large clusters up here. You can see a few of the Beacon, Newburgh, river towns as well showing up. And then Westchester, again, some spread throughout the county, but really southern Westchester, New Rochelle, White Plains, Yonkers really dominating the permit counts for the county. So, this is in absolute terms, 56,000 feels like a lot of housing. But the thing that we've really continued to look at over time and have been concerned about on a city basis and on a regional basis is the growing gap between economic strength and housing strength. So this is just a chart looking at our average annual employment going back as far as 1990. And this is housing stock over the same period. So what you can see is, our employment patterns are very cyclical. This is the dot-com bust here. This is the Great Recession. Here's COVID. But overall, there's a continuing gap between the acceleration of economic growth in the region and housing really staying, static in its production rates. So, we started in, let's say like in 2000, we've got about 1 million more jobs than homes. And today we've got 1,050,000 more jobs than homes or so. There's this perverse incentive of the loss of jobs in COVID creating some relief on that pressure, right? If you think of every job as a person who needs to be housed, then having less jobs in our region certainly has a diminishing effect on the, for a moment, on the pressure on our housing markets. And certainly I think we all saw that, in 2020, 2021 in the center of the region, where there had been so much pressure for housing. We, for the first time in quite a while, saw people leaving and saw some of that, that pressure diminish. But that's gone. We're basically back to where we are, which means that the pressure of that gap and that sort of scarcity of housing relative to our economic condition, persists and has every, indication of continuing to strengthen over time. And, again, when we say we're all in this together, what we know is that, when you have a housing scarcity as we do in this region, it puts pressure on the most vulnerable among us. New York City and Westchester are fairly similar in the amounts of our population that are experiencing housing burden, spending more than 30% of their income on producing housing. And another part of the trend that we've continued to think about from the economic perspective is our ability to draw talent to the region, and house them effectively, right? We care about housing, as a human benefit and people being able to, have quality lives and take care of themselves and obviously, abate homelessness, but we also care about it from an economic perspective and our ability to continue to grow good jobs depending on our ability to keep talent and attract talent to this region. This map shows us that over time, we are losing we're losing out in the prime age population. So particularly population aged 25 to 54, just grown over the last, let's say, 15 years since 2010 at 4%. Nationally has only grown by 1% in our region. We're seeing more people go to other parts of the country. And you can see here that spatial mismatch through our region where in blue, the places that have been adding the most housing are, of course, the places that have been increasing their labor force in this really critical cohort, whereas other parts of the region are just, do not have the housing supply to be attracting that cohort and are essentially aging in place far more. So, that's the sort of picture that we see, in New York City is this, this picture of constraint and a real focus from a planning perspective on the need to, unlock more opportunity, especially for housing, but also for jobs in mixed use communities. We're constantly thinking down to the ground plane scale and to how we create great neighborhoods as we continue to help the city grow around our existing transit assets and our sort of mature existing built environment. So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the big projects that have been on our agenda in New York City, sort of in this post-COVID era. Probably the most famous, or that's gotten a lot of national attention at this point, is the trifecta of initiatives traveling under the City of Yes umbrella. So City of Yes is an initiative to update our whole zoning code on a citywide basis in 3 different sort of thematic components, all of which have now been adopted into law in New York City. The first was approved in 2023, City of Yes for carbon neutrality. That really focused on trying to make it easier to do all of the energy efficient sort of emissions reducing activities that we want to see in our city. So it did everything from make it easier to put solar panels on roofs to reclad an existing building in a way that brought its skin into energy efficient standards without breaking prior envelope or floor area calculations, allowed for electric vehicles to occur in more places, battery storage to occur in more places, dealt with composting and recycling in more 21st century focused ways, a whole slew of initiatives in that sort of space. Adopted in 2024 was City of Yes for economic opportunity, which was our wholesale update of all of our commercial zoning regulations. First time since we tackled that part of our zoning since 1961. Just starting with our use regulations, we had, definitions on the book for typewriter repair, but not for a cell phone shop. But practically speaking, we just had an enormous number of arcane rules that we learned were making it really hard for small businesses to locate in new or existing space in the city. And so we found, after working with our business community for about a year and a half, 18 different individual ways to try and clean some of that up. From making it easier to build a film studio by giving a little bit more room in an envelope in districts that otherwise have height exposure rules, or allowing for more mixing of commercial and residential without being as prescriptive about floor sequencing, or changing our loading dock rules to make it so that you didn't have to cut a new hole in a 19th century building, all the way through rewriting our use codes entirely and reorganizing our use lists in a much more rational way, and in a way that will ultimately allow for more automation and not a lay understanding of use allowances. The third, City of Yes for housing opportunity, really was the remit was build a little bit more housing in every neighborhood of the city. So we've built into this proposal, not a proposal anymore, adopted into law, everything from accessory dwelling units to town center zoning, TOD, We changed our density rules to allow for more smaller units. We created a universal sort of inclusionary mechanism called universal affordability that now allows for bonusing of 100% affordable units into every neighborhood of the city, whereas before that we had been doing inclusionary bonuses sort of neighborhood by neighborhood as we updated those codes. Ultimately, the forecasts are that we've unlocked capacity for about 80,000 new units under the housing opportunity adopted at the end of last year. So that's a really big one. That was a enormous focus of our agency for the last couple of years, all of those citywide initiatives. Where we're now in is mostly working on some very large neighborhood rezonings, also adopted last year. I think many on this call are probably quite familiar with the Bronx Metro North line that will bring new stations, 4 new stations into the East Bronx that are not well served by transit today, and then connect up into New Rochelle and allow for that new accessibility for Westchester residents in the east side of the county into Penn Station. But for us, it's an enormous TOD opportunity. We've been working hand in hand with the MTA for some time and passed rezonings to create 7,000 homes, but also up to 10,000 jobs in particularly the Morris Park neighborhoods, where there's already a very large growing medical cluster. We just recently passed the Atlantic Avenue mixed use plan. This is the area around the Atlantic Station on the terminus of the Long Island Railroad, another 4,600 homes in this area. Also pretty strong job potential, very central, sort of downtown central business district of Brooklyn here, combined with some really necessary streetscape improvements to address Atlantic Avenue. We're in end stage process for the Midtown South mixed use plan. This is the area around Penn Station and Madison Square Garden. You can see Madison Square Garden in the aerial here. Enormously transit, center of the region, most transit accessible place probably in the country. And in these 4 quadrants, we don't currently allow housing. So this is a rezoning that would allow for true mixed use in these areas. It's also a place where we are for the first time experimenting with some new licensure we got from through the state in last state legislature to go above 12 FAR. Historically, we've been had our density in New York City capped by state law. That was relieved in legislative packages last year. So these will be some of the highest density residential areas of new construction, at least, that we've seen in the city. Older buildings have had some flexibility. We do have, 18, 19 FAR residential buildings when you're talking about an old commercial building that's converted. But some really exciting work happening here in its end stages. We're also in public review for an enormous proposal in Jamaica around the AirTrain station and the Long Island Railroad regional center there. We are currently have a public hearing going on downstairs on our Long Island City proposal. You can see in this drawing here a lot of new skyscrapers in front of the historic Citicorp building. We're really extending what has been a successful growth of, I think, the nation's fastest growing neighborhood in Long Island City, and giving it a little bit more room to grow towards the waterfront. We also recently created, moving out of neighborhood rezonings here, a green fast track that updated our own environmental rules to create a fast track for smaller, affordable buildings, and for other classifications of projects that were really just getting mired in our own process. So we did a sort of fine-tooth comb, finding things that we could put through type 2 reviews. We've just launched the Manhattan Plan, which is a really visionary effort to look at the entire island of Manhattan and really think about future population growth and housing growth there. Manhattan is well below its historic heights of population and housing. Now, some of that is probably good. We don't want to return to the Lower East Side being as crowded as it was in 1920. But it is really not contributing at the rates that, some of our outer boroughs are at this point. And especially post-COVID with storefront vacancy on the rise in New York, in the core, there's a lot of opportunity here, we think, to be looking for more mixed use and more opportunities in Manhattan overall. So that's sort of an engagement effort that's just kicked off. We're also in mid-process on a charter revision commission in New York City. So this isn't actually something that our agency does. It's done at arm's length, but enormously important for the work that we do should these pass. The Charter Revision Commission authored a final report last week, and has put forward specific language that'll be voted on by New Yorkers in our general election in November, that change our charter and how it functions on land use approvals, basically creating a check to the city council and the practice of member deference, to try and create more citywide focus on political approvals. Goes further on creating some of those fast tracks for affordable housing, and a series of other moves that are really related at trying to unlock the process to create more potential for growth over the next generation. Just launched, and potentially of interest to some of our Westchester colleagues, is a study of White Plains Road, where we'll again be looking at sort of the potential for more housing and more mixed use areas along the Metro North line. We are mid-stage in a citywide industrial plan where we're really thinking about the future of our industrial areas, where we can encourage more mixed use, where we can encourage more industry to come into our mixed use areas, and where we really need to reserve and think about the places that we, continue to need segregated and heavy industry to support the future of the city. Yeah, and I think that's where I'll end off on sort of review of things that we're up to. But one last piece, if I guess I'm running a little long, but I'll still pull it up for a second if I can, is to leave you with some resources. So a lot of the research that we shared today, and I'm sure we can make a copy of the presentation available through WIMP, but a lot of it is available on our website in live forms. We have a Metro Region Explorer that has a lot of different data levels that allows you to explore in map form spatial patterns of the region. And we have this employment dashboard that looks at economic change on a county by county basis. And they're both on our website at nyc.gov/region, which, let's see, can I pull that up quickly? Are you seeing the tracker now, Sam? Let me ask you to check.
Yep, we're good. I see it.
So if I were to go to our dashboard, I can search for, let's say, Westchester County. And it's going to tell me how many jobs are in Westchester County according to the latest state data, how those are broken out into different subsectors of the economy. It's going to allow me to look at change over time. It's going to let me look at employment change and wage change over time. It'll also allow me to go one level deeper. Let's say I want to see the industrial economy of Westchester. I can go in here and start to take a look at, construction patterns or manufacturing patterns. And I can also make geographic comparisons between, let's say, Westchester, all of the Hudson Valley, all of the region, New York City, and so on and so forth. So it's a really handy tool. We use it all the time to be looking at, like, what's going on in Brooklyn or Queens. But we also use it to look at what's happening in other parts of the region and compare our boroughs against, their comparators, what's happening in the Bronx versus Westchester, For instance, super relevant when we're doing rezonings in Westchester. So this is a resource, it's live all the time and it's available to all of you. But I'll end where I started, which is to say, we're always happy to be resources, and please always feel free to reach out. I think our contact information is probably in the chat now, but you can find it on this website as well, nyc.gov/region. With that, I'll pull down slides and see where we are in questions.
Thank you, Karen. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you didn't see in the chat, the CM credits were posted as this program was going on. So I've shared a link in the chat. And also to planning board and zoning board members, you will get an email with the training certificate tomorrow to the email that you registered with. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A. We do have a question in the chat. If you want to take a look at that, Carolyn.
Yeah, you're talking about William Santini's, I think is the first one I see in here. Yeah, I think, look, this is a great question, and I think it's fundamental to all of the work that we do, right? That we have, on the one hand, an existential challenge of creating enough housing to create affordability and livability in our communities, and a very physical challenge of how to fit that in ways that are sensitive to the existing communities that we represent. While I certainly would be, every community has to figure out that path for itself and how to do change in the most nuanced and sensitive way that we can find. What I can say of our plans in the City of Yes is that we tried to do that exactly, right? We didn't put skyscrapers, in the center of a single family district. We tried to focus on gentle density, on small changes in our lowest density areas, a little accessory dwelling unit, in a place where historically we would have allowed maybe a small apartment building of 3 or 4 stories on a corner, with single story, next to it, to re-allow that kind of type to enter a lower density area, but not have the entire area go towards apartment buildings, right? So sensitive targeted improvements, absolutely focused on transit, right? So we've been much more aggressive in New York City, where we have fixed rail assets. We've been slightly less aggressive in places where we have really good bus service or maybe regional rail. And we're certainly investing in micro transit. We have the largest bike network in the country. We're building bike lanes everywhere, right? Everything we can do to try and make it so that creating one new family doesn't necessarily mean creating 2 new cars. I think really speaks to the issues of how you manage traffic congestion and overcrowding. But I think there have been so many times where traffic and overcrowding, or just infrastructure challenges, which are very real, right? For us, it's not just those, it's, we could all name like water and sewer challenges, building new schools, all of this stuff is really hard. But I think the idea that it's a paralysis is where I think we've just tried to find ways to, move past that and say, no, the unaffordability of, the inability of our children to live here really should be the unacceptable condition. And so to, really move from there to finding the best solutions we can. I'm now just seeing you need to read the questions. I think it was fairly clear from my answer, but the question specifically was, as Upper Westchester and Putnam work to meet growing housing needs, how can towns thoughtfully add new housing units while preserving the area's rural character and avoiding increased traffic congestion and overcrowding? So, how do we grow without harming what we have? Okay. Oh, and you repeated it too, Greg. Okay. And I think that's all we've got. So for right now,
we got another one in the Q&A.
Oh, is there another box here?
Yep.
I see. Curious for elaboration on TOD. You mentioned expansions along the Metro North line with an estimated 10,000 jobs created or 6,000 to 7,000 housing units. Curious what goes into these numbers, if there are policy initiatives at play in these efforts to bridge the existing gap between housing and job creation? Also, can you speak to longer range transit expansion plans to take advantages of opportunities in underperforming areas of the region with respect to housing creation? So let me try and answer this on a couple of fronts, and Malcolm, you'll tell me if I've gotten all of the nuances here. So, like I imagine all of you who are working in a practitioner capacity, we have seeker and an environmental review process that requires us to create a reasonable worst case development scenario that looks very specifically at the existing conditions on the ground, the future that we imagine, the increment of development between those two scenarios, and the likely potential of development on individual sites. So in some sense, when the numbers I've given here are, a direct result of a math exercise looking at what sites we think are likely to develop under the scenario we're putting forward and how many units of housing or job space they can accommodate. If you're interested in a really deep dive to how we do that and the methodologies in New York City around environmental review, all of our former environmental reviews, including the one here for the Metro North study, are posted on our website. Planning.nyc.gov is our main page, and I think there's a tab for environmental review. So feel free to nerd out on our environmental methodology if that gets into you. Now, there's a sort of broader question here, I think, about how do we actually create jobs and housing in these locations? Housing, I would say, if you're in an area where there's a lot of market pressure, tends to take care of itself to some extent. What doesn't take care of itself is creating a great neighborhood. And so we're really focused on, in like an initiative like that, on the design of the station and how it will meet the housing areas and the public investments in streets and plazas that will meet it to sort of create that armature and infrastructure. But we're pretty sure, that we will get housing because there's an enormous deficit of housing. And so we have enough comparable experience that lifting zoning may be enough in some locations to leverage some amount of housing. Jobs, I think, is actually a lot harder. And, in an area like that, we've done a lot of work with the existing medical institutions, Albert Einstein, Montefiore, some of the larger medical stakeholders, to really think about the growth there. They're thinking about workforce development. The city tries to catalyze, small components of growth, but I think those are much longer term projects. Creating those economic nodes that aren't just sort of local services or medical services generally. I think they really depend on anchors and a lot of sustained catalytic investment. And then longer range transit expansion plans. There's a lot there, and I would also encourage perhaps WIMF to ask the MTA at some point. I think I saw Robin Hollander on the call here to come speak on that point more globally. There's a $60 billion capital plan from MTA, much of which I think is affecting the ability to have increased service on Metro North. So there's surely a lot to say. I'll mention one additional one I think that we're thinking about. When we talk about taking advantage of opportunities in underperforming areas, would be something like the IBX, which is something that's been getting a lot of press attention lately. There's a freight rail line that's very under limited use. It's active, but only 1 or 2 trains a day that runs through Brooklyn and Queens, for which the MTA has been doing some initial studying on activation to create a really important circumferential line in New York City. And so that study is sort of where we were with, I think, the Bronx Metro North 10 years ago in really thinking through the initial land use implications of bringing transit to that area. So, while the city, at least when we're talking about fixed rail and those is really reliant on the MTA to make the transit investments that make land use possible, I think over time there's been a really good partnership sort of in iterations to think through how we prepare the land and the development potential in a way that unlocks it on the right schedule, right? So that we're we're going to have a transit investment, and now all of a sudden we'll have a neighborhood that's ready to grow around that transit investment. So that's, to me, is like, the macro component of that is making sure that we have the growth potential where we're going to have station areas. And then I think at a much more granular potential, it's been around like station planning and really not losing sight of the how you make a neighborhood around it, especially a new station. And, incredibly detailed work, for which we've had a lot of back and forth with the MTA over time.
I think that's all we have. We can do a last call for questions, if anyone has any. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So thank you again, Carolyn.
Yeah,
And,
great. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for stepping in. Thanks everybody for your attention, and please feel free to reach out if you've got other questions.
Thank you, everyone.